Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for what I hope will be a helpful and informative session for those who are interested in contracting with the Bureau of Land Management to provide off-range corral or pasture facilities and services. Welcome, and we're so glad to have you all join us this morning. For awareness, we are recording this webinar and plan to share it publicly on our website, and we will have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the presentations. So here's a brief overview of what we plan to discuss today on this webinar. We'll get started with quick introductions of our panelists and a short overview of the BLM's Wild Horse and Burro program's mission and goals. Then we'll start in on the meat of the content today with an overview of off-range pasture and corral facilities, and then an introduction to acquisitions or contracting. Finally, we'll take your questions at the end of the presentation. We ask that you save your questions until the question portion at the end of the presentations. So now I'll ask each of our panelists to briefly turn on their cameras and introduce themselves. I'll start first. I'm Jason Luderman, Public Affairs Specialist for the BLM Wild Horse and Burro program, and I'm the host of this webinar today. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Turner. I'm the contracting officer over the Wild Horse and Burro program for Headquarters Contracting.
Thanks, Lisa. Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob Sharp. I'm a Wild Horse and Burro Specialist, BLM's headquarter staff, and I oversee the off-range pasture program.
Thanks, Rob. And Paul?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Paul McGuire. I'm the Deputy Division Chief for Off-Range for the Headquarters Wild Horse and Burro program. And our responsibility within our branch is, among other things, off-range holding. So welcome and thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, panelists. So we'll go ahead and just go over some the Wild Horse and Burro program's mission and goals before we get into the presentations. Just so you have a bit of context about how our off-range pastures and corrals fit into the program and what roles they play. So the BLM is responsible for managing wild horses and burros as part of a thriving natural ecological balance on public lands, and that's directed by the Wild Free Roaming Horses and Burros Act of 1971. Under this direction, our goal is to manage and protect healthy wild horses and burros on healthy public lands. And as you all know, or will soon learn, we do that through a variety of non-lethal management tools. Our primary concern is with managing wild horse and burro herd growth, which can reach up to 20% per year if not curbed. To reduce overpopulation, the BLM typically gathers excess animals and prepares and offers them for adoption to qualified homes from an off-range corral facility. We also provide lifetime care at an off-range pasture for those animals that do not get adopted or sold. BLM currently manages approximately 145,000 wild horses and burros on the range in a network of off-range corrals and pastures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Sharp to go over off-range pasture requirements.
Thanks, Jason. So just wanted to point out the next two sections, we're talking about off-range pastures and off-range corrals. Paul and myself are going to be providing some broad overview of the key requirements of these solicitations. And just note that a full list of requirements will be available as part of the solicitation package, and will be necessary to respond to with the request for proposals that Lisa is going to talk about at the end of this presentation. Specific to our off-range pasture program, we are seeking off-range pasture service contracts in the 13 states noted on your screen. And I will note for the states of Oregon and Washington, this solicitation is going to be specific to the east side of the Cascade Mountain Range. The key objectives of our off-range pasture contracts, number one is provide year-round care for a range of 200 up to 10,000 excess wild horses. And these contracts are have a life of 5 to 10 years. And I will note that these are non-reproducing animals within these contracts. So their contracts are issued segregated by mares from geldings. Second key component of our pasture program is to provide an environment to allow free roam behavior and minimize animal handling by humans. This is the salient difference between our pasture and corral programs, as the animals are within a pasture environment, not within the confines of corral pens. And lastly, we require contractors to care for these horses on private lands owned or controlled by the contractor for the life of the contract. And this by law, by federal law, excludes unfenced federal lands. In addition, when I say owned or controlled, offerer doesn't have to outright own the land, just need to show control for the duration of that contract period. So long-term lease agreements, and those agreements need to be in place at the time of proposal submittal. Next, we're going to get into some of the requirements of the facility itself. So although these are pasture contracts, we do require an adequate corral facility to be used for sorting, unloading, loading, and working groups of horses. And just like our standards for our corral facilities, these facilities need to be fence heights of at least 6 feet, constructed of stout materials such as pipe and sucker rod corrals, panels, wood rails, something other than just a wire pan. They also need to have small traps or dry lots attached to these corrals, and these are used to acclimate animals upon arrival to their new pasture facility, as well as to be used when holding animals for activities such as shipping from the facility or weaning foals in the event that red mares are delivered to the corral or pasture facility. Next, we're going to talk about perimeter fencing of the pasture themselves. So we're no longer discussing the handling facilities of the pasture contract. These are actual pasture fences. Minimum requirement, we're looking at least 48 inches tall, 4 strands of at least barbed wire, and that's both perimeter as well as interior pasture fences. And just depending on the situation, sometimes we do require some more visual barriers such as flaggings and specific locations within a pasture environment, and that'll all be worked out as we move closer to awarding a contract. In addition to water availability within our pastures themselves, anytime animals are held and holding our acclimation pens, they do also need to have access to a continuous supply of clean water at all times. And I will note that a lot of times offerers don't have facilities that quite meet our program specifications at the time they're proposing their pasture facility, and that's 100% okay. Just note that any modifications necessary to a corral facility or pasture fencing will need to be made before animals are delivered to that specific contract. All right. Next point of consideration for these proposals, and this is key. We do need to have proposals submitted by individuals that are extremely knowledgeable with livestock management, equine behavior, nutritional requirements, as well as grazing management. And big key for that is, we're looking for pasture facilities that can sustain animals for, a long period of time. So being able to sustain that forage base that supports everything in this particular program is key. We do require at least weekly observation of animals in every pasture to observe their body condition, identify any injuries or mortalities, as well as assess forage and water conditions. Contractors are required to maintain a monthly inventory, and this is what is used when submitting their monthly invoices. In addition, the contractor is responsible to provide both staffing and equipment necessary to address emergency situations, such as fire, extreme weather events, those types of unforeseen. So that responsibility lies on the contractor as well. I want to give you just a very broad overview of what to expect, essentially from the time an offeror submits a proposal for a pasture contract through to the period that animals are actually going to be arriving at the facility. Lisa's going to address the request for proposals here in just a bit, but proposal review. So after an offeror submits their final proposal to the BLM in response to the request for proposals, we give it the initial dry lab review. So number one, we're looking to make sure all the requested information is provided in the proposal. We also are verifying that what's stated on paper meets our contract requirements, so meets the specifications that we require. This phase is the initial screen out phase in our review. So incomplete proposals that are lacking specificity for us to be able to identify whether they meet our requirements, they will be dropped. So it is imperative that an offeror submits a complete and accurate proposal from the start. Those proposals that pass muster on the initial review move on to our site visit stage. This is where a team of Wild Horse and Burro staff are going to come out to the offered lands and do a couple things. Number one, verify the facility actually meets our requirements as stated, within the proposal itself. We're going to identify any issues needing mitigation. If there's parcels of unfenced federal land within that pasture, are there any hazards that need to be mitigated prior to BLM making a task order award and bringing horses? Next, we're going to rank and make a recommendation to our contracting staff, whether we move forward with the contract award or not, based on this site visit. And lastly, last step in this is the issuance of an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract award. So this doesn't have any dollar figures attached to it. This just notifies the contractor that their facility is adequate. BLM intends to provide them the opportunity to bid on task orders to move forward and provide pasture for these horses. After that step, we move into our environmental review. The meat and potatoes behind this portion is our National Environmental Policy Act process. And unfortunately, this process can take up to 24 months. This is where BLM staff look at, number one, finalizing a carrying capacity for the offered land. So we do our own carrying capacity analysis based on the proposal. And this is where we complete any required survey work, such as cultural, if there's Endangered Species Act issues, those types of issues. After this stage and after completion of National Environmental Policy Act, we move to contract award. And this is where the offeror, as I mentioned above, has the opportunity, the time frame to make those necessary facility modifications, adjust those corrals, work on the pasture fences, and then we put out solicitations for task orders to be issued. And these task orders are where the funding comes. So when an offeror bids on a task order, they're awarded it. And that's when we start coordinating loads of horses to be brought to the facility. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Paul McGuire, and he's going to give you a overview of our off-range corral requirements.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. And welcome again, everybody. So the next few slides will cover our off-range corral requirements and what we're looking for. So BLM is seeking proposals for off-range corrals in the coming weeks. And our purpose and need for this effort is to acquire facilities that can receive, prepare, and maintain excess wild horses and burros that are removed from Western rangelands, which as part of our mission, as Jason was going over a little bit earlier. These facilities would also allow opportunities for the public to view and or adopt or purchase wild horse and burros from the facilities, or to serve as shipping points to other locations where private placement events might be taking place. Another option would be for proposals to include training services for animals held at the facility to enhance the adoptability of those animals. We found as a program, unsurprisingly, that trained animals are in higher demand. So including that as part of our mix of off-range holding facilities is certainly advantageous to the program. And then finally, these facilities would also serve as points for preparing animals that can't be placed into private care for shipment to off-range pastures, as Rob was just discussing. So those are long-term holding facilities for Waldorfs and Burros that unfortunately can't be placed into private care, but they're very good long-term care facilities for those animals. I would just note in regards to this requirement, the actual geographic area of consideration is still being worked out. It'll generally focus on the Western and Central United States. And the final targeted regions will be identified based on meeting BLM's strategic need for the Wilderness and Burro program. The other thing I would note, just anticipation of some possible questions at the end, when we talk about preparing animals, this involves obviously sorting them by age, sex, and temperament, quarantining, freeze marking, vaccinating, gelding, and hoof trimming. So those are all included in the kinds of services that occur at these off-range facilities. And the freeze marking, most of you are probably aware, is the unique angle mark that you see on wild horses and burros. So that's something that's applied to animals when they're initially received and prepared at these facilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so I touched a little bit on some of the services that will be provided, but the exact services and the minimum and maximum capacities that will be provided for at each facility will be identified in the solicitation when it finally posts and in the task orders. So we don't have those details today, but when the solicitation posts, those will be available to you. All facilities must comply with BLM's Comprehensive Animal Welfare Program, which is the next slide. I'll highlight a little bit more about that, but must be compliant with CAWP in regards to design and the care and treatment and handling procedures. And then something to note too, that a basic standard for animals in BLM care, whether in corrals or pastures, is that they're maintained in a suitable body condition. Typically a body condition score of 4 on the Henneke scale, if you're familiar with that, as determined by the contracting officer's representative, which if you've never done business with the government before the contracting officer's representative, or CORE, as it's often referred to, is the principal point of contact between the agency and the contractor in terms of operational oversight. So you certainly have a enduring relationship with your CORE should you be selected and awarded a contract. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. And this is the slide that touches on our CAWP standards. And I can go through these quickly. I would just note that what's included on this slide is by no means exhaustive or all-inclusive of all of our CAWP standards when it comes to off-range holding. But basically, all animals have to have adequate space to move freely within a dry confines and able to rest within that area. There must be a sufficient number of pens to allow for working the animals and sorting them. All the fences, gates, alleys, etc., must be constructed of stout materials in a proper working condition for horses. Those must be at least 6 feet high. The standard is 5 feet high for burros, with rails not above 12 inches from the ground. Obviously, adequate drainage is a key factor. We can't have the animals living in sloppy and muddy conditions, so drainage is something we're going to be looking at closely. And then the last two probably go without saying, but I'll say them. You have to have adequate access to clean water at all times for all animals, as well as the feeding areas must be accessible to all animals. I would just loop back quickly. Rob went through the process of how we evaluate proposals. And that process for pastures is very similar, if not identical, for corrals. So you can certainly refer back to that if you're considering submitting a proposal for corrals. That same process would largely follow. That's pretty much what I have for the off-range corral portion. Look forward to any questions we might have at the end. And with that, I can bounce it over to Lisa.
Hi, thank you, Paul, and thank you all for being here. I would like to go over the acquisition process, as I know it can be very confusing. I'll be going over the tentative plan for calendar year 2024. This entails what headquarters anticipates on releasing throughout calendar year 2024. Then I'll go over the RFP process and the areas to focus on in a solicitation. Lastly, and most important, vendors must be registered in SAM in order to propose on any government effort. So I'll also be going over that process. So right here, the BLM anticipates posting 3 separate solicitations, also known as requests for proposals, throughout calendar year 2024 for the program. The details provided below are tentative and they're subject to change. More information for solicitations will be available on SAM.gov. Each notice is finalized and released to the public. So again, these are all estimates, but this is what we are seeing for this year. Next, I wanted to touch on the differences between contracts versus financial assistance. Although there are similarities, there are differences. So a big one is the terminology. So for procurement, there's contractor, we use the term contractor, and for financial assistant, you'll see recipient used. And as far as who benefits from the two, so procurement, you'll see a direct BLM benefit, whereas financial assistance, there's a direct public benefit. So how property ownership is determined, purchased or retained by BLM versus transferred to recipient, and how each effort is announced. So this again is huge. For procurement, the announcements are on SAM.gov, whereas financial assistance, you will see them on grants.gov. Here are a few RFP milestones. When you see a sources sought notice, this is not a solicitation. It's simply for market research purposes. So if something goes out that says sources sought and you miss it or you do not submit anything, it's totally fine. There will be other opportunities coming up. So the next one then would be before a solicitation goes out, a pre-solicitation is posted for 15 days. Again, this is not an official solicitation. And then lastly, the solicitation, once it's posted, it'll be posted for 30 to 60 days. And my team, our goal is to send out a link to all vendors with the solicitation information and the information included on SAM.gov. So anything you guys have questions on, of course, the contact information will be included in the solicitation. So next, I wanted to touch on the format, how the request for proposal will look. So the standard form, the one that we use is an SF33. It's also, I guess we call it the uniform contract format. So we have part 1 is the schedule. So you'll see that in the solicitation. You'll see part 2, which is the contract clauses. Part 3 is a list of documents. Part 4 is reps and certs. And then that kind of goes over into my next slide, which goes over the critical items. So it's very, very, very important. I know I'm going to foot stomp this, but fill in every CLIN with a dollar amount per the unit price, including cents. So if there's anything missing, we wouldn't be able to consider it. So just please, please, please include everything that you can. For section K and L, when you see that, so that's reps and certs. So there's going to be an area to fill in based on what can be supported in SAM.gov, what you list, and also by the Small Business Administration. So pretty much what you've registered as, they have to be the same, or else we wouldn't be able to validate that information. So for section L, so this area is instructions and conditions and notices to offer. So this section is going to identify what is required in the offer's proposal. So submit what is the exact amount that's required. So if it says only 20 pages and you submit 21, then we could potentially throw that out because it was not exactly what we required. So please pay attention to those little details. For section M, evaluation factors for award. So this identifies how the offeror's proposal will be evaluated. So that information will be included as well. And we've talked about the PWS. So I know that Paul and Rob hit on some of those areas that will be identified in there as well. So again, just please make sure to read that as well. So next, just some general RFP info. The offer should be submitted as a BAFO or best and final offer in the event BLM doesn't go into discussions or negotiations. If you have questions or the RFP is unclear, then the offerors should submit their questions to allow an amendment to be issued, providing answers on for offers with exclusions and will not be considered. So basically, if the solicitation goes out and there's questions and we have answers, if they're very specific or they kind of change what the original solicitation said, then we will submit or we will release a amendment. So then that will also go back out to you and say, this is what was changed versus what the original one said. So this will be what we're looking at now. So the offeror shall only submit questions and contact the BLM employee identified in the RFP. So again, only contact people that are listed in the RFP. Lastly is registering with SAM, but I just wanted to touch back on this slide before. So please remember to reach out to the contract specialist or the CO authorized in the RFP in section G. Don't put your company in a questionable or unethical position by reaching out to someone you know at BLM to inquire on an upcoming or current solicitation. I know sometimes it's easy to contact a core or somebody you've been working with, but please just try to get in touch with who the contract specialist or CO is. So going back to registering with SAM, all vendors must have a valid SAM.gov registration, which you complete on the SAM.gov website. You can see the URL here, and the website will provide instructions for creating a user account. Note, I mean, this is the big one, that it can take up to 24 hours for SAM registration to activate. So please try to just get in there as soon as possible, because we definitely don't want you to be held up and you cannot propose on an opportunity that's coming out. So please, again, I can't say that enough, just please register, because we definitely look at that. And that's all I had for acquisitions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. With that, we will now move into our live Q&A portion of the presentation of the webinar. If you have a question, please use the Zoom function to raise your hand. You should be able to get to that at the bottom toolbar on your screen if you're on a computer. When you are called upon to ask your question, I will give you the ability to unmute yourself, and it will keep you unmuted until we move to the next questioner. Please identify the panelist that your question is for, if applicable, and we ask that you please be respectful and kind and keep your questions focused on what was presented during this webinar. After this webinar, you may contact us if you still have questions. Programmatic questions can be submitted to wildhorse@blm.gov, and we will find the right subject matter expert to answer that question.
And Jason, I just want to jump in real quick for folks who are on the phone. It's going to be *9 to raise your hand. And then once we call on you to unmute yourself, it's going to be *6 to unmute.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. And then, as mentioned earlier, this webinar will be posted to our website, the URL on your screen. And you can also find Q&As at that URL as well. That could be helpful. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started with the questions. I will just be going down the order that we received the questions. And we'll start with Jane Frizzle. I will allow you to mute yourself now.
Thank you, Jason. It's Jane Frizzell. And I only have one question for Lisa. I missed what the acronym RFP stands for.
Yeah, great question. So RFP is a request for a proposal.
Request for. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Unmute.
Thank you, Jane. Now we'll move on to Danny Mitchell. Go ahead, Danny.
Hi, thank you. I had a couple of questions. The first one is if you have a property that could support both off-range corrals and off-range pasture operations, which one should you apply for? Or should it be separate proposals for each?
Thanks, Danny. It would be separate proposals for each, just need to identify which opportunity you're going to pursue, be it pastures or corrals.
Okay, so you couldn't do both, you have to just do one?
Correct. Yeah, the services are specific to either pasture or corral, unless, of course, your facility and land is large enough to provide you the opportunity to potentially bid on both, but they would be separate contracts.
Thank you very much. As part of, I guess, either proposal, could you include modification costs as part of that proposal for, say, fencing, chutes, water management, etc.?
Yeah, excellent question. So yes, as part of your proposal, obviously you're going to want to capture those costs associated with modifying existing facilities, and those can either be captured in your overall what we call the feed day cost. So that's kind of the key line item that we pay contractors for under pastures and corral facilities. In addition, both solicitations will have some startup cost line items associated with it to help contractors, assist contractors in the initial startup of the facility. So potentially some of those facility modification costs could be captured in there as well.
Thank you. My final question is for water poor areas. So for example, if you are, west of the Cascades or in Montana, in some of that dry prairie area, it's very water poor. Could trucking in water be an option as far as that providing water towers, for example, and something like that be part of the proposal, or will you not consider water poor areas?
We'll obviously consider it. We definitely want to see a very thought out plan on providing supplemental water, aside from natural or groundwater. But we will want to see, as part of the required specifications for the pastures specifically, we're going to want to see an inventory of the water availability within each pasture. And that gets down to estimates of gallons, if stored in water holes or reservoirs, and the ability for wells and pumps to pump accordingly. So it's not an automatic disqualifier, but we just need to see a very thought out plan on providing supplemental water if necessary.
Understood. Yeah, drilling, the area that I'm looking at right now is about 3,000 acres, but there is no water currently on it. So drilling a well would be in the range of $40,000 per well. And so I didn't know if that would be a disqualifier.
Yeah, we just, again, proposal would just have to show how we are going to provide that continuous supply of water to those horses.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Danny, and thank you, Rob. Let's move to Laura Teague.
Thank you. For offers that may have an existing contract and want to add acreage, do we just write the proposal or the solicitation can we refer back to the original, or we should just if we're using corrals from the original contract, how do we refer the two contracts together? Just write it completely separate, or can we use facilities that were associated with the original contract?
Yeah, good question, Laura. Yes, you can absolutely use facilities associated with another pasture contract. We will, if we're submitting a proposal, we're going to have to provide, the necessary detail, respond to, the specifications in that proposal, for the additional acreages. But yes, they can utilize the same, corral infrastructure.
Okay, so we would just maybe provide maps and diagrams that would would be those of those facilities, but they wouldn't necessarily be on the acres that were new acres.
Absolutely. Yep, that
Okay.
would be correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Paul, I believe, has a comment pertaining to a question ago.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And it was Danny's question. I appreciate the question, Danny. And it made me think it might not be clear to everyone that we're talking about two separate solicitations here, one for corrals and one for pastures. So it wouldn't be the case where you'd be trying to blend them if that's what you're interested in doing. So the two solicitations will be coming out probably on different dates, in fact. So if a corral proposal is what you're interested in putting together, then that's the solicitation you'd be responding to. If it pasture, then it would be that one. So I just wanted to clarify that point. If others were thinking that this is a single solicitation and you have to kind of choose corral or pasture, it is in fact two separate solicitations that'll be coming out that you can respond to. So thank you for that opportunity.
All right, thanks, Paul. Let's go to Jana Reeves with our next question.
I actually have Lyle here with me, and he's the one with the question. Lyle Anderson.
So is there any set asides along with these?
Lyle, can you repeat that question, please?
So is there any set aside? So is this we know it's a small business, but is it a woman set aside? Is it a Native American set aside? Is there any of that, or is it free and open?
I'm going to turn that one over to Lisa from a contracting perspective on what's known at this point.
Right now, it hasn't been determined on either RFP, so there'll be more to come on that.
The other question, like on the off range, there's been, like, we've had one before. So on the hay situation, is that completely taken out, or they define in a drought how you get paid?
Yeah, Lyle, at this point, we haven't 100% identified, the stipulation for emergency hay beyond that 4-month period that's been in our past pasture contracts. I will say right now it's looking like we're not going to be including the economic price adjustment clause with either of these solicitations. Therefore, when we're coming up with, our proposal and feed day prices, we want to take that into account. But the request for proposals and the full solicitation will list that opportunity if indeed it's included for emergency hay outside of what's contracted for that 4-month period.
Okay, and one more quick question, and thanks for answering all these. On the short term, so do we know what states that are open to?
The corral.
Or excuse me, on the corral.
The corral facility.
The corral facility. Are you guys just going to pick a handful of states, or is it going to be open to, the western half of the US?
Yeah, I think I can probably handle that one. So at present, we kind of have a general idea. We'll be looking more at the western and central United States. We haven't zeroed in on the exact regions or states, but certainly those will be identified in the RFP when it posts.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Lyle, and thanks, Jana. We will move now to Riley Wheeler.
Hello. I was wondering, do you guys ever consider running pasture horses in the state of Iowa?
Yeah, Riley, good question. Right now, specific to this upcoming solicitation, Iowa's not going to be included. We do have one pasture contract presently within the state of Iowa. But just for logistical reasons, as well as some environmental conditions, right now we're just limited it to those 13 states that were identified in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Riley. Let's move to Hadley Gillum.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off that question right before Riley, on supplemental feed. Obviously, if you move into a 5 to 10 year contract, majority of our grazing contracts in central US are on a 3-year or 1-year basis. So would we just need to project our risk on an average across 10 years, depending on drought, supplemental feed, things of that nature? I mean, our rainfall can differ by, 30-40% from year to year, which obviously affects grazing conditions. So do we just assess that on a 10-year average with approximate supplemental feed that may need to be added to maintain the overall well-being of these horses?
Yeah, excellent question, Hadley. Yes, that is correct. It is incumbent upon in the proposal to project those anticipated costs over, either the 5-year or that 10-year period. And that is why I think in both solicitations, we are going to be providing the option for either a 5-year or a 10-year performance period.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that question. Oh, it looks like we had a question from a phone number, but that just really lowered their hand. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand again. I believe it is *9 to do that. So we'll go to Kyle Rosenbaum. Kyle, you should be able to unmute yourself to talk. Hey, Kyle, we are not hearing you on our end. If you want to try and unmute yourself or make sure your microphone is connected.
Kyle, if you want to real quick, at the bottom left of your Zoom window, next to the mute button, there's that little up caret icon. Just click that, and then in the little pop-up menu that comes up, you should see a list of microphones, and just make sure the one that you want to use is selected. I'll give you a couple seconds here. And then if it doesn't work right away, we'll go to the next person and come back to you.
Okay, Kyle, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next questioner, but I will come back to you after this to see if you've gotten your microphone figured out. Let's go to Clinton Smith.
Hey, how's it going? So I have a couple questions as well. Thank you for answering questions, by the way. We do greatly appreciate you guys. There any previous proposals available for us to go view and see maybe how they were written or what you guys are looking for exactly in your proposals?
Yeah, Clinton, good question. Specifically proposal wise, no, obviously proposals are what we receive from potential offerers. So we hold that information, here with our BLM and contracting staff as somewhat proprietary, just because that is someone's offer. In terms of past solicitations, on that SAM.gov website, you can query for past both corral and pasture solicitations, and that's bringing those historic solicitations up, we'll provide you a background on the specifications at the time. Noted that some of those specifications will have likely been updated or changed, leading to these present opportunities. But that is probably your best resource for looking at past requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go check that out. Second question, as a functioning nonprofit 501c3, we are located in Central Florida, and we have a piece of property, 30 plus acres, that is already a fully functioning equestrian facility that is up for sale. It has 30 RV hookups. It has a full 100 by 200 or 150 by 250 covered arena. It already has pens set up in the back. It has availability to hold a minimum of probably 100 horses. It has the availability to be corral as well as training facility. Is that something that you guys could potentially be interested in getting horses to the Southeast to open up a whole new clientele of people that are closer to our area to help reach a 10,000 goal to move these animals this year?
Rob, I'll go ahead and take that one. Thank you, Clinton. And that's a very good question. So for the solicitations that'll be coming up here in the next few weeks, of course, we're more focused on the central and western United States for corrals, and then the 13 states that Rob identified for pastures. But what I can say is that we'll be working on a broader solicitation for corrals later this year. And we'll work through identifying the exact areas of consideration for those as well. So while I can't say the area you're discussing would necessarily fall within that, we will be working on that broader solicitation to support our private placement efforts in more areas of the country, including eastern states. So thank you for that question. And I would just say keep your eyes open, and we will plan to do informational webinars like this in advance of any future major solicitations that we have planned, including the one later this year for additional corral facilities in the eastern part of the United States and elsewhere. So thank you again. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you so much. So, okay. We will wait to put in any solicitation proposals until we hear further for those other eastern states. Is that probably the best? Yeah.
Yeah, and something else I would note just for everyone's benefit. So I think everyone who registered for this webinar will keep your contact information, and future webinars will make sure you're notified when those will be happening, so you have the opportunity to join and learn more then.
Awesome. Listen, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. I know we all do, and we think it's great what y'all are doing, and we are glad to be a part of this goal that y'all are trying to meet.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Clinton. Let's go back to Kyle. Kyle, I'm going to try and allow you to talk again, to unmute yourself, and we'll see if your mic is fixed. Okay, I don't think we're still not hearing you on our end. But if you do want to submit your question to us at the email address on your screen, wildhorse@blm.gov, put in the subject line off-range corral or pasture contracting. We'll be sure to get back to you.
Jason, real quick,
Yeah.
Kyle's audio source has changed. It looks like he's now on the phone, or he's on phone audio. So Kyle, if you have access to your phone keypad, try typing *6 to unmute yourself real quick.
There we go. Thank you, everybody, for walking through this. Okay, my apologies for the lack of Zoom abilities. Hey, so I had a question on like reserve funds for unforeseen events or things along that nature. You know, heavy weather caused damages to type of fencing or anything like that. Is there going to be some type of reserve fund built into this contract to cover us in case of those things happening?
Yeah, good question, Kyle. Right now, no, there is not. There's not going to be, an additional line item of funding, specific to unforeseen circumstances. It is that is why it's very incumbent upon an offerer to put forth their best shot at their proposal, as well as the associated budget to support that, to include responding to those unforeseen situations, such as wildfire, abnormal, snowfall, those type of situations.
Yeah, definitely a tough thing to account for, but thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All right, thanks, Kyle. I'm going to turn it over to Paul real quick for some clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. This is actually just a follow-up to Clinton's question earlier about the notifications of future opportunities. If folks register in SAM, and when you do, and hopefully you will, there's an option for you to select notifications in SAM itself. So we would encourage you to do that, as well as I mentioned, we'll certainly keep your contact information and contact you directly from the program as those opportunities arise. But when you're registering SAM, look for that notification option and select that as well. That's all I had, Jason.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
I'm sorry, this is Lisa. Just to add on to that, you can actually put in there the NAICS code that you want your auto notification for. So that's 115210 for anyone needing that information.
That's 115210.
Yes.
Thanks, Lisa. Next questioner is, I think, Donita Torres. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Super. Thank you. Yeah, this question's for Paul. Paul, I was curious if you could elaborate more on enabling opportunities for the public to view and or adopt purchase animals, and what that might look like while still maintaining, minimal human contact.
Sure, happy to answer that. So depending on how the facility will be operating and how it's configured, a facility might not necessarily be open to the public on a regular basis. We have facilities now that aren't necessarily open to the public on a regular basis, but within their contract, it provides that maybe an annual or semi-annual tour for the public would be accommodated. Other facilities may be open, say, one day a month to allow the public to come in and view and adopt horses. Others may be open more frequently than that, more regularly. So it kind of depends on the proposal that you put together. Again, what we would hope to see is that all facilities would include within their proposal, or all offers would include within their proposal options for the public to have an opportunity to either view or adopt horses from those facilities.
And Paul, you're referring to corral facilities, correct?
I'm referring to corral facilities, and if I misunderstood the question, I apologize. Were you referring to pastures, Donita?
No, that's very helpful. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed. Appreciate you.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Donita, and thanks, Paul. Lee Guthrie. Lee, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. This is a question for Lisa Turner, and the information about selecting notifications in SAM is very helpful, but we are a current contractor under a pasture contract. Will we receive an email with the 15-day notice prior to the solicitation coming out? And then would we receive an email with notification of the solicitation as well?
Yes, we'll do our best with the contact information that we have. And Lee, I believe I have your information. So yes, you'll get notice for those.
And will the pasture proposal be a 60-day time period to respond?
Yeah, just estimates right now, but definitely in that window.
And I understood that might come out mid-March. Can you tell us any closer than spring, or it's pretty general right now?
Pretty general right now.
Okay, okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And I will just reiterate that everybody who has registered for this webinar will also get an email. So you'll get, if you sign up to SAM, you'll get that notification, but you'll also get a notification by email from the horse program when these solicitations are live. Let's move to Gwen Fisher. Gwen, you can now unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. I just have one question. At the beginning of the presentation, it said that you provide year-round care for 200 to 10,000 horses. And I was just wondering if you put in a proposal for, let's just say like the minimum 200, do those 200 need to be all in the same pasture? Or can they be like, say, in 2 separate pastures that are a few miles apart?
Yeah, great question, Gwen. Yeah, so for our pasture contracts, all offered pastures don't have to be contiguous acreages. We're looking for pastures, you know, that if they're not contiguous, we want to see pastures within approximately a 30-mile radius of the base of that operation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Gwen. Let's move to Mary Jo Enfield. Mary Jo, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi there. So the first question is, would any contracts be considered for burros only?
I think I will turn that to Paul.
I'll take that. I think probably the short answer is no, other than with respect to pastures. We don't currently have any pastures for burros. All of our pastures house horses for us. And the reason for that is that there are fewer burros overall on public lands. And when they're removed, we're generally pretty successful in placing those into private care. So where we have excess animals that require long-term care by the agency, it's typically horses. But within corrals themselves, it wouldn't be the case that they would be exclusive to burros necessarily. There might be a preponderance of burros depending on where the corral is located. But in general, our corrals support both species.
Okay. And then
Per corral.
ask your, I don't know your question.
This is Dan. I'm here with Mary Jo. For the off-range corral, is there a minimum head number?
So it's going to vary depending on the target area. So it could be, I don't want to get into nailing down precise figures, but it could be as few as 100. It could be over 3,000. But those details will be specified in the solicitation when it posts.
Okay, thank you.
Is this one open for general people, or do you have to have a 501c3 for this one?
No, these would be commercial in nature. So 501c3 is not required to submit proposals under either of these solicitations.
And is it acceptable to have one for it?
I might bet that to Lisa to respond to. Lisa? They're asking, I think, if they submitted a proposal under a 501c3 organization, is that allowable for this type of solicitation?
Okay, yes. I would have to look into that more.
Okay. My last question is for, would that be something that we would just do ourselves, or we would hire it out like a professional contractor to do the fencing? Do you guys have a preference?
I think, that would be up to the vendor, how they choose to go about that. So if you were to construct that in-house or contract that, I don't think BLM would have necessarily a say or preference in how you go about that, as long as it meets our specifications.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and just to go back, because I was able to find that answer for you on whether or not you could propose under that, and you definitely can.
Can? Yes. Okay.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary Jo. We'll move on now to John Culver. John, you should be able to unmute yourself now. John, if you are talking, we're not getting it on our end. You may want to make sure you've selected the correct microphone. If you go to the little up caret next to the mute button on your screen, you should be able to select a microphone in that menu. Give you a couple more seconds here, and then we'll just move on and we'll come back. Okay, John, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next one and we'll come back to you. Let's go to Dan Anderson. Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, this question is probably for Paul. My question is, say you're starting from scratch with a new corral facility. What is the path forward to have it, as far as submitting your proposal, getting it approved, then an on-site inspection, but nothing's built, and then what's just the path for starting from scratch to getting awarded a contract and building a facility in the meantime?
Sure, and thank you for that question. And I might rope Rob in on this because I know he has quite a bit of experience in that area. But generally speaking, going back to the evaluation process that we follow, if a facility is not yet built, then there wouldn't be anything for us to evaluate on that front. And so generally speaking, you'd want to have a facility available for us to evaluate against your proposal. So Rob, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
The only other thing I'd add is following award of a task order. So that's what funds the care of animals for whatever period of time specified in that task order. There will be the opportunity to complete any further construction or modification to an existing facility. Generally, it's a couple months up to 120-day lead time prior to animals arriving to provide for facility construction or modification.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan, for your question. Let's try to go to John again. John, I'm going to allow John Culver, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Okay, John, we're still not getting you, so we're going to move on to the next questioner. But if you want to submit your question to wildhorse@blm.gov email address, we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Let's go ahead and move to Joshua Brewer. Joshua, you should be able to talk now or unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got a question for Rob. Gwen kind of asked the same thing and got me started on the first part as far as the property needing to be contiguous. I was reading through requirements and just trying to get an idea as far as modifications that would need to be made pertaining to semi loadouts and holding pens. So we currently have one semi trailer loadout with a large set of pens for each ranch. Would we be able to utilize that one loadout and pens, and then once the horses are acclimated, then move the horses around between properties with a pickup and stock trailer like we would with cattle? Or would we need to build a semi loadout for each field?
It don't necessarily have to have a permanent set of pens with loadout and all that for individual pastures. Once acclimated, animals can be moved, obviously through pasture. To a pasture, we have to have some means of being able to gather and corral and handle, for loadout if those animals need to leave that pasture in the future. So although it might not be a permanent set of pens in a particular pasture, having the ability, like, having a portable setup, panels, a portable loadout, that type of thing. We'd want to see a plan for being able to rehandle those animals in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet, Joshua.
Okay, thanks, Joshua. Let's go to Jana Reeves. Jana, you should be able to talk now.
Yes, I know that I heard Paul say that they didn't know for sure where the geographic area was going to be for the corral solicitation, but I must have missed if Rob said what the 13 states were that were going to be included in the pasture facilities. Could you think, Rob, you could say that again?
Yeah, Jana, and without looking at my slide, I'm sure I'm going to miss one, but
I must have missed it. Sorry.
should have this memorized by now. But essentially, we're gonna be looking at, here we go.
There it is.
I think
Okay.
it's up there, yeah. Colorado, Idaho, Kansas, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada,
I
North
must not
Dakota.
have read the slide very carefully.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. I think that answers my question.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jana. We'll go to Blair.
Hello, I have a couple of questions. So if you're awarded the proposal, when is the money granted? For, I'm sorry, for an off-range corral?
Yeah, it just varies.
And then okay, once you're granted, how are you awarded? Is it a monthly, a yearly, one-time thing?
Yeah, again, it kind of just depends on how the award was made and what was included. So, and how it was set up.
Okay, and then does that, are you guys doing this? Is this a yearly contract, 3, 4, 5 year?
I think right now we're talking about doing either 5 or 10 year.
5 or 10. Okay. For a corral?
Yeah. Did I have that right, Paul?
I believe that's correct, Lisa.
Okay.
Okay. I guess, and then is this, it was kind of, one person kind of asked it, but it wasn't really answered. Is this LLC 501 C3 or sole proprietor?
Yeah, anyone can provide a proposal.
Okay.
Mhm.
The last one is, if startup costs are listed, when would we, I guess you didn't really know when you'd receive the money. If we listed in, got the corrals, got everything else, but need to figure in like a chute for working. Is that awarded at the beginning, the middle?
I would say that's to be determined, yeah, based on the award.
Okay. Oh, if you've already got a BLM grant in place, can you be awarded another one?
This is a grant versus a contract?
I guess it would be if you have a contract in place.
Oh yeah, if you have a contract in place, yes, you could definitely have, you can propose and have a separate one as well.
Okay, so you can have more than one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and again, I know that there's similarities between grants and contracts, but yeah, they're pretty different. But I know our program sees a lot of cooperative agreements, so.
I guess then the last thing, but kind of doesn't sound like it's kind of to be determined. How would you bid this certain contract? Would it be per day, per month, per head, per year for a corral?
Yes, all of that information would be included in this solicitation, just the specifics. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when it's released, do you guys have any idea when it would be released? The corral portion?
I believe that's coming up quick, but don't have an exact date.
Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate it, you guys. That was all of my questions. So
yeah, and I would like to clarify, because somebody on my team said that they can't be a shared facility. So it has to be separate facilities. So if you already have a current contract, well, then this one will be for a separate facility,
Correct, correct.
but you could
Okay.
still have, okay, I just want to clarify that, but yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
All right,
Great
thank you.
questions. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Blair. Let's move to Tracy Helton. Tracy, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, can you bear with me, everybody here? I'm sorry, I'm an absolute layman. I'm just looking into this. So my question is on the corral portion. Is there a minimum acreage required? I just have a small 4.5, 5 acres behind my house here. So it'd be mostly a holding corral, I guess. And is that even enough acreage to have a corral on for the horses?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to answer that. So the specifications will be for a minimum number of head, and that'll be included in the solicitation when it posts. And then the facility itself, of course, has to meet the sort of standards and specifications that we went over a little bit earlier concerning the ability of the animals to move freely within that area. So if the amount of area that you have falls below the ability to actually provide that level of service, then it might not be considered. But
okay,
I wouldn't say that to preclude you from submitting a proposal, reviewing the solicitation, and submitting a proposal if you think you can meet that standard.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. Let's go to Hunter Reed. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello, I have two questions. My first question is, how does the BLM assess the value of a wild horse or burro?
Well, I'm not sure, excuse me, where you're getting at with that question, but I'll try to answer it. For BLM, the value of wild horse and burros is established by law. Congress determined these to be a resource that the agency is responsible for managing, both on range and off range. So if you're speaking in terms of dollar value, I'm not sure I have an answer to that question for you, but it's a public value that the BLM upholds in carrying out the law. So hopefully that answers your question for you.
Yes, that does. My second question, if the government cuts the funding to the wild horse and burro program, what happens to the contracts that are currently in place?
So I might bat that over to Lisa. What would be the outcome in a situation like that?
I was kind of interested to see how you would respond, Paul, but thanks.
I'm happy to follow you. I guess maybe I will take a stab at that. So obviously Congress has an interest in ensuring that wild horse and burros are properly cared for, whether on range or off range. Off range holding is a very high priority for the agency, since we have assumed responsibility for these animals, having removed them from the range, and Congress understands that very well. And so that would be at the forefront of their minds when considering appropriations for the agency. And while I can't speak for Congress, certainly they're not going to lose sight of the fact that they, through the agency, have assumed this responsibility to ensure ongoing care for those animals and provide the resources necessary to carry that out.
Excellent.
Yeah, we would definitely see where we are in the contract, but we would not abandon the contracts at all. We'd see what was priority.
Awesome. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. Let's move to Kelsey Parisi, I believe. Kelsey, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello. So I had a couple of questions. One of which was, are these contracts going to have any requirements regarding like liability insurance for the corral managers, owners?
I think we'll, Lisa, would you be able to answer a question like that, or maybe Paul? any kind of liability insurance.
I think I might lean on Lisa for that one.
I'm sorry, I was wanting to find the correct information before I gave it out. But we're gonna have, there's a clause that requires certificate of insurance per DOI that will be included in the contract.
Okay, great. And then my other question, I know we've kind of talked about how this solicitation is most likely going to be more central and western states. I do remember in 2021 that there was a solicitation for an East Coast facility, and it was noted in that solicitation that the facility wouldn't be able to be within 100 miles of the coast. If another East Coast facility proposal is released, do you know if that would still be a requirement? I'm in Pennsylvania, on like the edge of what would be close to 100 miles, but we're technically under 100 miles. So thinking about, properties, and whatnot that we're looking into based on mileage, if that was still going to be a requirement.
So I'll take a stab at that one. Since that would be a future solicitation, I'm not sure I could say exactly whether or not that would be a requirement. But certainly, I think probably part of the reason for a requirement like that would be concerns about potential severe weather incidents that might impact a facility that close to the coast. So the agency would look at things like that in determining what the area of consideration would be. But I'm afraid I don't have a firm answer for you at this time as to what that would be in any upcoming solicitation that would include that region.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kelsey. Karen Rice, you're up next, and you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, earlier in the questions or maybe it was in the presentation, I think Rob said that the new proposals will be able to capture the costs of upgrading facilities and fences, etc. If you're an existing pasture contractor, will they do anything for retroactive?
Hi, Karen. No, not as part as either of these solicitations that are forthcoming. The startup costs that I referenced were, costs associated with basically putting the task order into play. So dollars associated with, say, any required permits, anything of that nature, more administration stuff to launch the contract itself. Any past expenditures by a contractor for modifying facility or pasture fences, anything like that, those would not be, the opportunity to recapture those would not be available in these current solicitations.
Okay, so if you were starting all over, that opportunity would probably be there. In a different place.
Yeah, and again, let me clarify those startup costs that I mentioned. They were specific to, the cost of launching a contract. So cost to cover, again, required permits, potentially if it was in a separate line item, insurance, something along those lines. The costs associated with modifying your corral facility or your pasture fencing, those would all need to be factored into the line items. So your feed day costs essentially would be the bulk of that.
Okay, I misunderstood it then because I thought it said something about the costs of upgrading. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, Karen.
All right, thank you, Karen. Let's go to Kelsey Parisi. Kelsey, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Kelsey, it looks like you're still muted. Try unmuting your...
I just think I didn't lower my hand from the last time. Apologies.
Okay, no problem. David Schalk. David, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, real quickly, in the past, I've noticed that certain ranches that butt up to BLM property are not going to be used. Is that still the case?
Yeah, David, there's no requirement to preclude private lands that adjoin federal land, including BLM managed land. As we discussed in the presentation, those any unfenced parcels of federal land will require mitigation. You know, by law, we're not allowed to run horses on other federal lands outside of herd areas, herd management areas, or U.S. Forest Service territories. The only additional point of detail I'll add to that is when we talk about adjoining BLM lands, we do require pasture and corral facilities that are located at least 10 miles from BLM herd management areas. Does that answer your question?
Well, okay, no, because you kind of said one of each. So let's say my ranch butts up to BLM property, and yes, I have the proper fencing up there. Am I still acceptable under this proposal?
Yes, there is no requirement to not, to not be surrounded by public land, if that makes sense. So
okay, so that's not going to hurt me any.
It shouldn't. Nope. Unless there's an issue associated with that adjoining public land that will need to be mitigated if there's any type of activity going on. Domestic horse permit or something like that that's authorized right across the fence. We'll have to look at that and mitigate it accordingly.
Okay, second of all, what if I've got a BLM property inside my private property?
And are you specifically talking about pasture contract?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's a situation where that BLM property would need to be excluded generally by fencing or not using that particular pasture to prevent horses from ranging onto that parcel of BLM.
Okay, and my last question is this. I have seen other pasture facilities that do not have enough pasture per head for the amount of heads that they have on the property. Yes, they do supplement feed them and they're all being fed and they're fine, but they still don't qualify for the one head for 40 acres and your pasture is only enough for 200 and you know what I'm saying? Your pasture is set up for 200 horses, but technically there's not enough pasture for 200 horses.
Could you specify exactly what the question is on that, David?
I'm sorry. If there is a pasture that is set up for 200 horses, but yet there's not enough nutritional value in the pasture to keep 200 horses alive, is that going to be not allowed? I mean, let's say I've got those 200 acres and I can supplement my feed so they're all fed, but they don't technically by law have 40 acres per head.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're asking here. So as part of the requirement for the information that we request in terms of carrying capacity for the, an offered pasture, we're going to be looking for a carrying capacity that can provide for at least 8 months out of the year pasture forage for those animals for a minimum of 200 per the contract. So, a pasture, an offered pasture that doesn't show a carrying capacity that meets that requirement likely would be cause for us not to want to move forward with contract award. We want to see a pasture environment, pasture forage on the offered lands that support those animals for at least an 8-month period with a supplemental feed plan for those periods of dormancy.
Okay,
Does that answer that question?
Yes, it does.
All right.
All right, thank you, David. Next questions comes from Justin Pope. Justin, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thanks for taking my question. This will probably be a question for Lisa. Will there be a provision in the request for pricing for deviation in horse numbers, whereas we've got a permit for, or we're permitted to hold 2,000 horses, and BLM provides us with 200 horses, and we have the overhead cost of the capacity of the facility. Is there going to be a provision within that contract to be able to adjust pricing based on the number of head, and then also adjust the price based on the cost of hay for and we're talking about a corral here, whereas hay prices doubled last year. We were paying twice as much as we ever have, and they're, other than maybe like a hardship clause or something like that, there really wasn't a way to recoup that. And we, we're, if you're on a 5-year contract and you base the prices off of, the current conditions, and then an unexpected, increase in hay costs, what provisions are there going to be in the contract for these two scenarios?
Okay. Yes, I understand, because of the economy and everything, it was very hard. There's been a lot of hardship for many vendors this past year. So unfortunately, we cannot advise on how to price the unforeseen circumstances. We can't tell you like what to bulk up in your pricing. So really just paying attention to, once the solicitation goes out, like where the price per head, and however you forecast or however you want to make your pricing, just make sure to include every single thing that you would think it would cost to go into that price per head. So, which again, I can't tell you those numbers. I can't tell you how to do that.
Sure.
But,
no, and I understand that, but will there be a provision in the contract to be able to adjust for these different things, because it could potentially be a huge difference in the price provided for BLM. There's, on every facility, there's going to be a fixed operating cost, and the price per head is going to be wildly different between 2,000 and 200. That makes sense. And
yeah, and the numbers based on what the solicitation says, how it's going to be broken out depending on the number of heads. So for 200, it may be a lot different than 2,000. So there's going to be opportunities to go to address what those amounts are between those, if that makes sense.
But there's no guarantee from BLM that just because we're approved for 2,000 that we're going to have 2,000. Is that correct?
Correct. We would just stick to what. Yeah, we would just stick to what the minimum amount is, which is, we haven't. I don't know what those set numbers are, and those would be addressed in the solicitation. But yeah, we would just be held to the minimum amount.
Okay.
But I do understand, that's a great question, because a lot of vendors, since the contract may say 2,000 and they prepare the facility for 2,000, well, you may not have 2,000 at your facility. So just to be sure to look at that carefully.
Well, and what about I know there's, when you're actually doing the RFP, when you're filling it out for the contract, there's a whole section in there for deviation, correct? Where if you deviate on a specific item, you can explain why it's different. Does that immediately put your contract to jeopardy of being rejected, or are those things reviewed in a common sense way to be considered in the contract?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not allowing any deviations or exceptions, because that can cause, just all kinds of things. So we would not be allowing those. They would be considered. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for
And
answering my
just
question.
touch on the provisions or if there's going to be anything in the contract that allows for any of the hardship issues. There will not be any economic price adjustment clauses included in either one of these.
Is there not a hardship clause though, where if things get extremely difficult, you could ask for more funding under hardship?
Right now, unfortunately, no.
Okay.
Hey, Lisa, I wonder if I can just jump in. Justin's asking some great questions and I appreciate your responses to them. The one thing I would highlight, Justin, is that for corrals as well as for pastures, the performance periods that'll be offered are anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So part of the reason why we allow for that is just to the point that you're raising. So offers would need to anticipate what economic fluctuations might occur. Doing so over a 10-year period obviously is more complicated than doing so over a 5-year period. And so an offer may choose to submit a proposal that envisions a 5-year performance period and enable them to anticipate what those economic fluctuations might be and the impact they would have on their operations. I don't know if that gets somewhat to your question, but
yes, and that does. I mean, that does make sense. You wouldn't want to contract for 10 years if you didn't have things pretty well set. You know, if you're buying the majority of your hay, then it probably wouldn't make sense to do 10 years because somewhere in there could be an economic fluctuation that would cause some problems.
Very good.
Yeah, great questions though. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Justin. Let's move to Jacqueline. Jacqueline, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, I just have 2 quick questions. The first one was do you have to live on site of the property you're proposing? Does this physically have to be somebody living on site or can they live nearby?
Yeah, no, you do not need living on site.
Okay, and then the second question, just curious are these all going to be either geldings or mares, or is it going to be a combination of both? Do you know that answer yet?
Rob?
Yeah, good question, Jacqueline. For speaking specifically to pastures,
yes,
we award contracts for either mares or geldings, so we don't have individual contracts that have both. We do have some contracted facilities that half of the facility, a geographically separated portion of this facility runs mares, a geographically separated portion of the facility runs geldings. But we don't, within the pasture environment, we don't mix mares with geldings. And then for corrals, obviously, the function of a corral is different. So yes, corrals would likely have both wild horse, mares, and geldings, as well as potential for burros if necessary.
okay. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Jacqueline. Sherry Jo Yock, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I live in Northwest Oklahoma, and the property that I have thinking about has 3 wind turbines on it. It also has 2 inactive oil gas well sites and also 1 active gas site. Is that okay, acceptable? Does it have to be anything done with those areas? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. So yes, having other activities, energy development on the pasture doesn't automatically eliminate a proposal. We just want to make sure that there's mitigation measures in place to prevent those, both the facilities themselves as well as any any access requirement, major roads going to access those types of activities. Make sure they're mitigated so they don't pose a hazard to the animals in the pasture.
Yeah, when you say mitigated, do you mean like have fences up?
Yeah, yeah, fences around, oil derricks, fences, any major roads that receive, frequent and heavy vehicle traffic. Yeah, potentially fencing those out. Maybe there's a pasture within the ranch that it's just not conducive to exclude the potential hazards, and maybe we just don't use that as a horse pasture. So there's variety of methods that can be used to ensure those don't pose a hazard to the animals.
Okay, and that could be evaluated at that time and mitigated later.
Absolutely.
As whatever's feasible.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to, John Culver. Let's see if your microphone might be working. Go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself now. Oh,
And
it looks
John,
like,
if you're using the phone, it's *6 to unmute.
Hello?
Hi, John, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay, several questions. Number one, I don't know anything about, we've got a cattle ranch and that's all we've ever run. Grass is great. Are there any works out there, any papers out there that talk about the difference in horse, like wild horse grazing as opposed to what the cattle do to the grass? Are there any definitive studies out there that say the stocking rates should be different or this, that, or the other? So the concern here is for the health of the grass, and cattle and horses eat entirely different, that I know. But I don't know if there are any papers out there that are written that one could kind of come out with a little better, clear idea of what the condition of the pasture would be once the horses are done with it. So you guys know of anything in that resource area?
Yeah, John, off the top of my head, I don't have, citations to give you right now, but there's a litany of grazing studies looking at the difference between equine versus cattle grazing, both in the dietary overlap as well as patterns of use. We discuss it as a program every time we put out environmental documents looking at the impact of wild horse and burro use within a herd management area. So yes, those data are out there. I think if you go to an ag university, I think you can probably pull that necessary information that you'd be looking for.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you. At any point in time, can BLM personnel come out to your place and assess and say, okay, this is what I think you need to do to write a proper proposal? So like, I'm sure I've got some fence that is not 48 inches high, but my cattle aren't good jumpers, so that's not a problem. But for the horses, I'd probably have to put another strand up or something in certain areas. Will they come out and assess that prior to me submitting a proposal, or is that not the way it works?
Yeah, not prior to a proposal. So that type of information and the plan to fulfill the requirements of the contract, that's upon the offerer to provide that information. I will say after contract award, we have a cadre of BLM staff that is their job as they go out and they inspect our pasture and corral facilities, as well as have that dialogue with our contractors. If there are some unforeseen issues that arise during the performance of that contract. So that dialogue occurs, but pre-solicitation, putting together a proposal, that's on the offerer to identify those needs. And as Lisa discussed, the opportunity to ask questions during the request for proposal period is key. That's where, any unknowns, any questions of the offer should be addressed at that point.
Okay, last question. the property in question is about 2,000 acres and it's cross fenced. So you could make an argument for 400 or 500 acre pastures. And my understanding from talking to somebody, and they didn't know much more than I knew, but you guys do not allow rotational grazing. So let's say I was awarded.
Yeah,
Let's say I was awarded 200 animals. Could I not graze them on, and all pastures have great water. Could I not rotate those like on a weekly or 10-day basis? And I guess I don't understand the thought process there, other than the horses are meant to roam free and wild. That's where I read.
Right. There's no requirement that would prevent a contractor from, putting together a rotational grazing scheme for an off-range pasture. We have pastures that do that very thing. I will note that, unlike domestic livestock, which a lot of our contractors were previously involved with, intensive type grazing management is not as easy with these horses by any means as a domesticated livestock. But there's no requirement that would prevent someone from putting together a grazing plan that associates pasture rotations.
Great. I just thought of my last question. So it varies what part of the country you're in and all that. I get that. But as relating, this question would be, can you relate the stocking ratio of horses to cattle? So if it's 6 acres per AU, what would it be on horses? And I know it varies. It could be 30 acres in some areas of the country, maybe 100. I don't know. But where we are, it's quite a bit different than that. So do you have is it about the same stocking ratio?
It depends what
the forage is,
what the conversion factor one uses for their carrying capacity calculation. But generally, one horse is generally viewed as 1.3 or 1.4 animal unit months compared to, one for an adult cow or cow calf pair. That's the conversion factor that's generally used.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John.
All right, thank you, John. Mary Jo, you are next. Is that a new question or is that hand left over from your previous question?
Hi there, I have new questions. First is for insurance. For the liability insurance, is there a recommended amount of liability insurance, like per contract or per head or something?
I think we'll turn that to Lisa.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Is there a required minimum for liability insurance per contract or per head?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's just going to be in accordance with the clause which is to be determined, because that's what would be included in the RFP.
Does included mean, does the cost to be determined, or does BLM pay that?
Yeah, that information would just be shared in the RFP, just kind of the specifics behind that.
Okay, and then like our homeowners insurance, we're gonna have to get new homeowners insurance if we are awarded a contract. So would that difference be able to be included?
Again, we'd have to look at that when the RFP is out.
Okay, and then for the corrals, is there like a general number that are normally adopted? Like if you have 200 head or 100 head that normally 50% are adopted out, or 70%, or a goal when we're writing up the contract and the contract proposal?
Yeah, can I just ask for clarification, Mary Jo?
Yeah.
Are you talking about a pasture facility, a proposal for a pasture or a corral?
For corral.
For a corral. Oh, okay. No, I don't believe there's a requirement to target private placements, but to include provisions to allow private placements to occur. It's on the agency to set targets for adoption and sales goals and to try and achieve those. So working with our contractors through facilities, we strive to do that, but it's not a part of the proposal to hit certain placement targets.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, and I think going back on I just want to make sure I understood your question about the insurance. So are you asking if your homeowner's insurance would also be something that BLM would pay for, including with, yeah.
So the situation is I went with this last one that just came due on the 15th, and for SAM reasons, I wasn't able to do it. But when I went about the insurance and I was talking with my insurance agency, the current insurance only allows us to have 20 head. So if we're awarded this proposal, we would have to get different homeowners insurance too, because our current one wouldn't continue doing business with us.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can that cost be recaptured?
It looks like I just wanted to confer with the team. So it looks like you guys would need to buy farm or ranch insurance or commercial insurance to make sure that that cost is captured. So just a separate business policy.
Right. Yep. Because it's at our home where we would do the corral. So we would have to change homeowners insurance because they would drop us. So it'd be business.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. It's just switching. Yeah.
Okay.
Or just having a separate. Yeah. Sorry.
So we could recapture that then.
But I mean, everything, we can't really give you official guidance on that if it's going to be captured, but that can definitely be asked when the RP is released. So I don't want to give you like definite answers right now because that could put us in a bind. So I just want to make sure that, I'm not going to give you definite, but yeah, once the RP is released and that's a question that you want to ask, then we would consider that as a question.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Let's go to Lee Guthrie again. Lee, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. This is a question for Lisa Turner again. We were talking about economic price adjustment, which I believe we're under a contract right now that runs at the end of 2025. I think that our contract had that economic price adjustment and that it worked. To the best of my recollection, we never utilized it, but it worked both ways. If we bid something higher than what our costs really were, the onus was on us to let the BLM know to reduce our pay. I might have that wrong, but I do believe I saw that in the contract. If we build in, like we were talking about, bulking up line items in case of hardship, unforeseen cost in the next 5 to 10 years, and we overbid it, will there be a duty on our part to let you know to reduce the pay?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the EPA clause, I would have to look into the specifics of what your contract currently says, but how it traditionally would work is that it would have to be set up at the initial part of the contract. So a table or something would be set up saying, if it goes below this price, this is what's going to happen, and pretty much rules on how the clause would be activated. So without specifically knowing how your contract is set up or how it was activated, that's traditionally how it is if it's set up correctly. So yeah, there's no official answer to that, but yeah.
So that would be determined by the BLM when the contract comes out. We would just need to see how it's addressed at the time.
Yeah, and like I think Paul touched on it earlier, the solicitations that will be going out now, there will be no EPA clauses included.
Okay, so for the new contract that we'll be bidding, we don't get any extra money. We don't give any money back. Is that
correct?
Yeah,
there will be no, there won't be any of that in these contracts.
Okay, and then when we bid this contract, will it run consecutively to ours that closes out at the end of 2025, or will that one be terminated and we'll start anew with this contract?
Again, we can't really answer that right now, but yeah, we would have to see based on what the solicitation and based on how all the timelines are, and then we could make those. But again, we can't give that information right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lee. And I just want to reiterate for everybody that we can answer questions in general about the solicitation process. Real specific questions about the actual solicitations first off, you'll have an opportunity to review the full solicitation when it's posted, so that might answer your question. And then also there will be there's an official way to ask a question through the solicitation process that would actually be the proper way to ask those really specific questions about the solicitations. That said, we'll go to Brandon Jones. Brandon, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, I just got a quick question. They said central US. How far does central go? Does that go like Western Ohio, or does it go stop Illinois, Indiana for the corral?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would have you think in terms of like the Central Plains. So the Central Plains westward would be the general area that we would be looking for to target under the corral solicitation.
Okay, so at this point, the Western Ohio would be out.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brandon. Let's go to Kyle Renbarger. Kyle, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Kyle, it does still look like you are muted. There you go. So it looks like you're muting and unmuting yourself, but we can't hear you. Hey, Kyle, I'm going to move on to the next person. We'll come back to you to see if you've been able to switch out your mic or fix the problem. Let's go to Alton Williams. Alton, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Alton, it looks like you're still muted. You should be able to unmute yourself using the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Okay, Alton, we'll keep your hand up and come back to you in a second. Let's move on to I think we have another question from Justin Pope. Justin, I will unmute you now.
Sorry, thank you. One last quick question on the dollar amount of the contract that requires an independent audit. Lisa, can you answer that question?
Sorry, so are you asking the amount that will need to be evaluated, or?
So annually, I know if the contract's over a certain dollar amount, you have to have a independent audit completed annually. And is that dollar?
Yeah, I think it's regardless of any, I don't think there's a dollar amount set,
Okay.
so yeah.
Any contract, there's an independent audit that has to be performed annually, and BLM will cover the cost of that. Is that correct?
That question I will probably have to get back to you on because I don't have the official.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Go back to Alton and see if Alton can speak now. Alton, you can unmute yourself now. Okay. Alton, sorry, we cannot hear you anymore. If you want to submit your question to wildhorse@blm.gov, we will try to get an answer to you. Apologies for that. Let's move to our next question, and looking at time, I think we'll have 2 more questions. Patricia Patnod, you may be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you for this. Just a quick question. I'm in the Northeast, so I'm very interested in future funding opportunities. About when should we be looking for more information on that? And I'm sorry if I missed that.
Oh, you're good. So are you talking about for Eastern states or like Northeast is what you were saying? So
Yes.
I want to say, I don't have my slide. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, we're projecting that one to be, is this for a corral? Is that what you were saying?
Or any possible
Or anything?
but
So
most
yeah.
likely-
Okay. So for like the pastures, we have that one coming up spring 2024, and then we have one coming up in winter 2024.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Patricia. Let's move to Lyle McDonald with our final question for today. Lyle, you should be able to unmute yourself to talk.
Thank you. Are we going to be able to access a copy of this webinar or a copy of the slides after the fact? I apologize if you already mentioned that.
No, no worries. That's actually a good final question to end on. Yes, this presentation will be posted to our website. It's on your screen, blm.gov/WHB/funding opportunities. So we'll post this presentation, the slide deck, pretty quickly, probably today or tomorrow, and then the live recording. As soon as we get back our captioning for that, then we'll post a live recording at that link as well. And we will send out a notification to everybody who's registered here to let them know that the recording is available.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question on veterinarian costs. Is it similar to the last contract? Is that billed directly to the BLM, or does that need to be factored into our bid?
And that might be a question for Paul.
Yeah, I'll try that. So I think as we're finalizing what's called the performance work statement for this solicitation, I think those are some details that we're currently ironing out. So it's possible that that could be either way. And Lisa, I don't know if you have any further insight on that, but it is the case at times where the veterinary care might be a separate contract that BLM will have, or it can be through the prime contract. So Lisa, anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not the answer that everybody wants, but that will definitely come out with this solicitation as well. So that information will be included in there, how those are going to be handled.
Thank you. And then last question, is this contract going to be able to be utilized by the service disabled veteran owned businesses certification? Is that going to be able to be utilized on this contract for bidding competitiveness or not?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Or what was the question?
For this contract, are certified service disabled veteran owned businesses going to be able to utilize that for competitiveness in bidding on this contract? I know how those are usually the set asides. I don't know if they call those 8A or.
Yeah, and since we're still determining those, so I can't give you a definite on that, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lyle. And with that, we will go ahead and conclude this webinar for today. Again, if you do have additional questions, you can reach out to wildhorse@blm.gov. Put in your subject line, off-range corral and pasture contracting, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Again, this webinar slide deck will be posted to our website at blm.gov/WHB/funding opportunities. And the recording of this webinar should be posted as well within a couple of weeks. So thank you all for joining, and hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.